There is a particular kind of pause that happens before sending a simple text message. The cursor blinks. The sentence is typed, deleted, and typed again. Nothing about the message is complicated, yet for some people this moment stretches far longer than it should. This is not a story about one person. It is a pattern, observed quietly in offices, in relationships, and in private moments, in millions of people who think more than the situation seems to require. This video is not about diagnosing anyone. It is not about labeling a personality type or suggesting something is wrong with the way certain minds work. Instead, it looks closely at a behavior that psychology has studied for decades, a behavior often called overthinking, and tries to understand where it comes from, how it shows up in daily life, and why it holds on so tightly even when it brings more stress than clarity. If this kind of quiet observation about human behavior is something worth spending time on, staying until the end and subscribing helps more of these analyses reach people who think the same way. Now, the exploration begins. Before understanding why people overthink, it helps to separate overthinking from simply thinking carefully. Careful thinking has a destination. It gathers information, weighs options, and eventually arrives at a decision or a sense of closure. Overthinking, by contrast, often circles. It revisits the same thought from slightly different angles without ever truly settling. Psychology suggests that the defining feature of overthinking is not the depth of thought, but the lack of resolution at the end of it. A person who thinks carefully about a decision might spend 20 minutes weighing two job offers and then choose one, feeling settled even if some uncertainty remains. A person who overthinks might spend that same 20 minutes, then return to the decision an hour later, then again before sleep, then again the next morning, even after the decision has already been made. The thinking does not stop because clarity has been reached. It continues because the discomfort of uncertainty has not been resolved internally, regardless of how much external information has been gathered. This distinction matters because overthinking is often mistaken for diligence or responsibility. Many people who overthink are praised for being thorough, detail-oriented, or careful. From the outside, this looks like strength. From the inside, it can feel like being unable to put a thought down even when there is nothing more to be done. Research indicates that overthinking rarely begins as a standalone habit. It tends to grow from something deeper, a relationship with uncertainty itself. Most people experience some discomfort when facing the unknown, but for those who overthink, uncertainty often feels less like discomfort and more like danger. The mind responds to this perceived danger the way it would respond to any threat, by trying to gather more information, consider more angles, and prepare for more outcomes, even when the situation does not call for that level of vigilance. This intolerance of uncertainty often has roots in early life experiences. A child who grew up in an unpredictable environment, where moods, rules, or circumstances shifted without warning, may have learned early that paying close attention to small details could help anticipate problems before they happened. In adulthood, this learned vigilance does not simply disappear. It often transforms into a mental habit of scanning for risk, even in situations that carry very little actual risk. Another root often observed is the connection between overthinking and self-worth. For some, mistakes are not experienced as simple errors, but as evidence of failure or inadequacy. Psychology suggests that when self-worth becomes tightly linked to performance or approval, every decision begins to feel heavier than it is, because the stakes are not just about the decision itself, but about what the decision might say about the person making it. A third contributing factor is the desire for control. Life is full of variables that cannot be controlled: other people's reactions, future events, unpredictable outcomes. Overthinking can become a way of trying to control the uncontrollable by mentally simulating every possibility in advance. It offers an illusion of preparedness, even though in most cases the outcome unfolds regardless of how many times it was mentally rehearsed beforehand. Several behavioral patterns appear repeatedly among people who overthink, and recognizing them helps clarify how this trait operates in daily life. The first is replaying conversations. After a conversation ends, the mind returns to it, not to learn something new, but to search for hidden meaning in tone, wording, or pauses. A simple sentence like "we should talk later" can be replayed multiple times, with the listener trying to detect whether something is wrong, even when no clear evidence exists. The second pattern is over-preparing. This often appears before meetings, presentations, or important conversations. Where most people might prepare a few key points, someone who overthinks may prepare for every possible question, every possible reaction, and every possible way the conversation could go wrong, often spending far more time preparing than the situation requires. The third is decision paralysis. When choices multiply, so does the mental load. Choosing between two restaurants might take a few minutes for some, but for someone who overthinks, the decision can stretch into a lengthy comparison of menus, reviews, and even the mood each restaurant feels appropriate for, often resulting in frustration rather than satisfaction once a choice is finally made. The fourth is reassurance seeking. This can appear as repeatedly asking others if a decision was the right one, or asking the same question in different words to confirm an answer that was already given. The temporary relief from reassurance fades quickly, often leading to the same question being asked again later. The fifth is worst-case scenario rehearsal. The mind jumps ahead to imagine negative outcomes, playing them out in detail, sometimes even preparing responses to situations that have a very low chance of occurring. This is often mistaken for being realistic, when in fact, it is the mind treating an imagined outcome as something that requires real-time problem solving. These patterns become clearer when observed in everyday settings rather than abstract descriptions. Consider a workplace example. An employee finishes writing an email to a manager. Before sending it, they read it 5 times, adjusting tone, removing exclamation points that might seem too enthusiastic, then adding them back because the message might otherwise seem cold. After sending it, they continue to think about how the email might be received, sometimes opening their sent folder to reread it, searching for anything that might have been misinterpreted. The email itself may have been perfectly clear and professional from the very first draft, but the discomfort of uncertainty about how it will be perceived extends the process well beyond what is necessary. Consider a relationship example. A partner sends a text message that simply says, "Okay." The recipient begins to analyze this single word, wondering if it suggests annoyance, distance, or disinterest. They consider rereading previous messages to see if the tone shifted at some point in the conversation. They may ask a friend to interpret the message, searching for confirmation that nothing is wrong. In most cases, the word "okay" meant exactly what it said, a simple acknowledgement, but the absence of additional context creates space for the mind to fill in meaning that may not exist. Consider a daily life example. Someone is deciding what to wear for a casual outing with friends, an event with no real social stakes. Despite this, they try on multiple outfits, photograph themselves in each one, and ask a family member which looks better, sometimes changing again after receiving an answer. The decision, which holds very little actual consequence, becomes an extended process driven not by the outfit itself, but by a need to feel certain that the choice is right. In each of these examples, the situation itself does not require this level of analysis. What drives the behavior is not the external event, but an internal need to eliminate any possibility of discomfort, judgment, or regret, even when the chances of those outcomes are small. While overthinking often feels like a protective behavior, psychology suggests that it frequently produces the opposite of its intended effect. Instead of preventing mistakes or reducing anxiety, it tends to increase mental fatigue, delay decisions, and erode confidence over time. One of the clearest costs is time. Hours that could be spent resting, creating, or connecting with others are instead spent revisiting decisions that have already been made or analyzing situations that have already passed. This time cannot be recovered, and yet it often goes unnoticed because the mental activity feels productive, even when it produces no new outcome. Another cost is emotional energy. The nervous system does not fully distinguish between a real threat and an imagined one. When the mind repeatedly rehearses negative outcomes, the body often responds with the same tension, alertness, and unease it would experience during an actual difficult situation. Over time, this constant internal activity can lead to exhaustion that has no clear external cause, because the exhausting event happened internally, not externally. Overthinking also affects relationships. Partners, friends, or colleagues may sense the constant need for reassurance or the repeated questioning, and this can unintentionally create distance. Not because the overthinker is doing anything wrong, but because the pattern can be difficult for others to fully understand or respond to in a way that brings lasting relief. Perhaps the most significant cost is the erosion of self-trust. Each time a decision is delayed, revisited, or second-guessed, it reinforces an underlying belief that one's own judgment cannot be relied upon without extensive analysis. Over time, this can create a cycle where confidence in decision-making decreases, which in turn increases the perceived need to overthink the next decision and the one after that. If overthinking creates these costs, a reasonable question follows: why does the pattern continue? Psychology offers an answer rooted in short-term relief. Each time a person overthinks a situation and eventually reaches a decision or a moment of calm, the brain registers a sense of relief. This relief, even though it is temporary and often followed by renewed worry, reinforces the behavior. The mind begins to associate extensive thinking with safety, because in that specific instance, thinking eventually led to feeling better, even if the thinking itself was not what caused the situation to resolve. This creates a loop. Anxiety about uncertainty leads to overthinking. Overthinking eventually leads to some form of resolution or distraction. That resolution brings momentary relief. The relief reinforces the belief that overthinking was necessary, increasing the likelihood that the same pattern will be used again the next time uncertainty appears. Importantly, this loop is not a sign of weakness or lack of discipline. It is a learned mental habit, shaped by repeated reinforcement, similar to how many behavioral patterns form. Understanding this loop does not require judgment. It simply requires observation of how the habit sustains itself over time. Interestingly, research indicates that overthinking is often more common among individuals who are highly conscientious, empathetic, or detail-oriented. This challenges the assumption that overthinking is purely a flaw. In many cases, it is connected to traits that are otherwise valuable, such as caring deeply about outcomes, paying close attention to others' feelings, or wanting to do things well. This does not mean overthinking should be encouraged, but it does offer a more balanced perspective. The same mind that overanalyzes a text message may also be the mind that notices when a friend seems upset before anyone else does. The same mind that rewrites an email 5 times may also be the mind that produces unusually thoughtful, well-considered work. Psychology suggests that overthinking is often not the trait itself, but rather an overextension of traits that, in moderation, are genuinely beneficial. This reframing matters because it shifts the focus from "something is wrong with how I think" to "this is a thinking pattern that has gone slightly past its useful point." That shift, subtle as it seems, often changes how people relate to their own minds. Psychology does not suggest that overthinking disappears through force or willpower alone. Trying to just stop thinking about something often has the opposite effect, drawing more attention to the very thought one is trying to avoid. Instead, observed patterns suggest that change tends to happen gradually, through awareness rather than suppression. One pattern often noted is the practice of separating productive thought from repetitive thought. Productive thought moves toward a decision or new insight. Repetitive thought circles without producing anything new. Simply noticing which type of thinking is occurring, without trying to immediately stop it, often creates a small amount of distance between the person and the thought itself. Another observed pattern involves setting a natural endpoint for decision-making. Some individuals find that deciding in advance how much time or how many options a decision deserves, before they begin thinking about it, helps prevent the decision from expanding beyond its actual importance. This is not about ignoring careful thought, but about matching the level of analysis to the actual stakes involved. A third observed pattern is allowing imperfect decisions to exist without immediate evaluation. Many people who overthink feel a strong pull to immediately assess whether a decision was right after making it. Psychology suggests that delaying this evaluation, allowing some time to pass before judging the outcome, often reduces the urge to revisit the decision repeatedly in the meantime. None of these patterns offer a complete solution, and none are presented here as guaranteed fixes. They are simply patterns that have been observed in people who have gradually loosened the grip of overthinking, not by eliminating thought, but by changing their relationship with it. What stands out most when studying this pattern of behavior is not that overthinking is irrational. In many ways, it makes complete sense. It is the mind trying to protect against pain, embarrassment, or failure, using the only tool it has always relied on, thinking. The difficulty is not that thinking is wrong, but that thinking has limits, and beyond those limits, it stops solving problems and starts creating new ones. Perhaps the most important observation is this: certainty was never fully available to begin with. No amount of analysis can guarantee that a decision will be free of risk, that a relationship will be free of misunderstanding, or that a choice will be free of regret. Overthinking often searches for a guarantee that does not exist, no matter how much mental effort is invested in finding it. This is not a call to think less carefully, nor a suggestion that thoughtful people should become careless. It is simply an observation that there is often a quieter place between careless decisions and endless analysis, a place where enough thought has been given and where the rest is simply allowed to unfold. Most people who overthink already know, somewhere within them, when they have reached that point. The challenge is not in knowing it, but in trusting it. This exploration does not end with answers about any one individual, because human behavior rarely fits into a single explanation. It ends instead with a question worth sitting with. In the moments where the mind feels the need to think something through one more time, is it actually searching for clarity, or simply searching for certainty that was never going to arrive through thought alone? If this perspective resonated, or if a personal observation came to mind while watching, sharing that thought in the comments adds another layer to this discussion, one shaped not by theory alone, but by lived experience. Subscribing helps continue this kind of thoughtful exploration into human behavior, without urgency, simply as an invitation to those who find value in understanding the mind a little more clearly.